Howdy. Today, we're not going to talk about tactics. Today, we're going to talk about the future of the design of sales intelligence tools. And so, if you're here for tactics, bounce. Today, we're not going to talk about them. I want to talk about where I think the UX should go, where I'm going to take my UX, the evolution of these tools, and what I think is just fundamentally missing about the experience of sales intelligence tools specifically. But before we get into that, I want to talk about two trends. The first trend, and let's like go back, let's rewind 10 years or so. The first trend is to get better company data, basic data, employee headcount, contacts, etc. Right? So as time went on, you saw small additions to that list of filters that you had access to: headquarters, head count, keywords and company descriptions, which was really great, the SEO descriptions, tools like Harmonic that can tell you tracking of changes of headcount over time by department, even how much someone has raised, when have they raised, right? So, but the pace of those additions has been relatively small and diffuse. It exists in a lot of different places. So all these sales intelligence tools would come up to do a bunch of things. Ocean.io for great lookalike audiences, right? Where they can actually take the context of a company's website, etc., and say who are other companies very like them, right? So, but this slicing of additional data has not been, has not compounded, right? It has grown at small increments over time. Okay, so let's put that aside. Then there is intent, right? And intent was sold because we didn't have any better ideas. No one knows what the hell it means. Is it an IP address that I tracked? Is it an intern from the Salesforce tower? So you can't really tell if it works because someone says this account is surging, but they could just be giving you people on your ICP and you wouldn't know any better. And you're like, well, these accounts seem to do better. People online seem to do better. So you kind of have to like really fuzz your eyes and be like, does this work better than this? And all of the outbound plays I have tried to intent, I just have never worked. I've never got it to work. That's not to say that there's not value in it. Clearly, 6sense, super valuable company, demand base. But it always leaves you to wonder, where did this come from and why this person and why now and why this company? You just have to trust these companies. Okay, great. Now I want to talk about the rise of AI and the interface there. And I'm going to pop over to my screen here. You're all familiar with this interface, right? And what's interesting about ChatGPT is that the way in which they add capabilities is by adding different chat options. The interface doesn't change. If I want to do advanced data analytics or plugins or DALL-E, it doesn't change at all. I just select the model. Notice how the only thing that's changing is the icon. And they did this intentionally because they're all going to blend it back together, right? They understand now the model's not good enough, but this is coming. ChatGPT has announced this. So their interface is getting simpler, right? It is actually removing complexity. Okay, now I want to take a little trip to Apollo, right? Super familiar. Now, Apollo, I don't know why they're inviting Andrew Huberman. I don't know what Andrew Huberman has to do with podcast or with podcasting, with lead generation. But anyways, so this list here on the left: persona, name, job title, company, location, industry, and keywords. This really hasn't changed. Now we've got signals, right? Oh, okay. New partnership, new client signed, award or recognition, high buying intent, recent funding, rapid growth, new role. But these are all commodities. And what I mean by that is if a new partnership is maybe a different thing, like if they're connecting with your service, different thing. But like rapid growth, recent funding doesn't actually tell you anything. People love this, like, oh, and all these messages boil down to, I see that you just got money. I like money. Can I have your money? So it's really unfortunate because there's so much more great data. And I'm going to contrast this with a great friend of mine, Sam Gong, who works at Workspan. Now, what does Workspan do? So they will allow you to co-sell. So they sell into companies that are on the Azure marketplace or the Amazon marketplace or the Google marketplace. And Apollo doesn't help them know that, right? It's a bespoke piece of data for them. And every great growth organization that I have met, same thing, right? They all need additional columns of data. Okay, let's put a pin in that for a second. I want to go to my current interface now, and I'm about to throw it under the bus. So pretty similar interface here, right? You see at Apollo, a lot of the filters on the left. Actually, not as many filters as Apollo, it has fewer filters. Now, I can do things like inside the job description, I can look ramp the team, hypergrowth. Okay, so what this is going to do is this is going to sort about 90 days worth of jobs, 5.2 million jobs, by density of keyword. So this role at Ernst & Young, so there's 1.8 thousand jobs that in their job description mention ramp the team, hypergrowth, and hypergrowth, right? So this is, and line hypergrowth deals across so this is a company that is preparing for hypergrowth. Lead hyper 50 plus people, BDR. So this is like another team that is that is scaling their outbound efforts in this case. And I could refine this and say people. So human. So I actually just wanted to know hypergrowth in terms of hiring ahead of when it happens, right? Head of, right, that thrives in hypergrowth environments, hybrid. So there's a leap here, and there is a leap of thought, which is now you have context on the company, which you didn't have before with Apollo. You had to invent that context, right? I happen to know that people talk about it as hypergrowth, and I had to know the questions to ask. And the nice thing about Apollo is you don't really have to know what questions to ask because everyone knows headcount and everyone knows. But the problem is, because the question is not great, the output is not great, and you say some boring ass shit. So this is better. My interface here is better, but it puts the tax on the user. It puts a much, much higher tax on the user, which is spend time digging in the data. And if you do, there is a reward that exists on the other end, which is you'll know the timing when to reach out because you've got some recent data here. You have the context which to reach out, right? That's in the job description. And you'll know what to say, right? You can talk about what you have found in this job description. But I don't make it easy. All right, let's get back to ChatGPT. So this interface is actually getting simpler. They're probably going to, I know this, they've announced it. They're going to remove all these things, and you'll just be able to do, it's called multimodal. You'll be able to do everything here, image generation, data analysis. So the product is getting more powerful, but simpler to use. That never happens. And that is the possibility of a large language model. So I want to get into what I believe is the future here of sales tools. Now most of these sales tools are bolting on AI. You want to throw in, and that's how it has to be. You have to be able to understand how to bolt on AI before you can figure out how to revamp things. Now, I believe these large players, they're all over the board, right? Apollo is doing everything. They raised a bunch of money so they can do everything better. We have a sequencing tool, But the valuable piece has always been the data and the message. And the channel, sure, you have to be able to deploy it. But if you got a great data and great message, I don't spend any of my time thinking about email deliverability. And that's not only because Eric and I work together on it, but that's because I send good messages. And I have a nose for a good message. So where does this leave us? Well, the thing that UserGems found out, and UserGems has a really interesting business model. It is to monitor your existing customers and see if they change jobs. And the message is all about the person. Jordan, you liked us there. You probably like us now. What's going on? And one thing that my friend James Winter said to me, which is like pretty interesting, is how do you know if User Gems was the thing that made that sale happen or it was going to happen anyways? But that is neither here nor there. The most important thing about User Gems and what Christian said is that it only started working when we provided playbooks. Once you know that they changed jobs, we'll take care of that. Here is the playbook to deploy it to your market. And that's when User Gems took off. And now there's a bunch of copycat competitors that are building entire businesses on a playbook. That's what I think about this job changer thing. It's a playbook, and it's a rapidly commoditizing playbook. So things are going to get cheaper and cheaper. User Gems will continue to grow because they have brand, but there is a top line, into that sort of thing as the data gets cheaper. Clay.com can do this, like Harmonic.ai can do this. This job changer thing can monitor, right? It's because very fast Silicon Valley builders saw this and they said, "Great, I'm going to imitate." All right. Let's talk about generative AI and how the interface will turn into ChatGPT, because it is not intuitive how I believe this interface will change. So I think that the very best way to create a sales tool is to infer context with the large language models from the brightest people at the company and query larger data sets more specifically and deploy them into playbooks. 5 things, right? And the way in which this happens is actually not what you think. Instead of getting more generic filters, we're going to have more specific filters on the back end. You may never even see them. This is what I'm doing right now with my data. And so for the jobs data, I'm doing things like matching a closed job to a person. I'm determining who has the most benefits, right, that offer the most benefits as a company. I'm telling technographics, so which tools and technologies are people using? What is the density of that use across which departments? There's actually a lot of great hypergrowth. I can tell you which companies are about to undergo hypergrowth. So I am tagging this contextual data and turning it into structured data. Huge difference, right? Now, the large language models right now are not so good that I can feed basically 10 million jobs and find the exact right job for you. The embedding search that we have in our product is like okay at this, but there's more context that is needed to be able to write that embedding search really well. Okay, so what does this mean for the interface? It means that, and this is where I'm marching, I'm going to be adding way more filters. So instead of 20, 30 filters, think 300, think 500, right? These are all going to be additional things that happen way in the back end. You may not ever see this. And what's going to happen is you're going to log into a ChatGPT-like interface. And in that interface, I'm going to pull in all the context from your website and from your LinkedIn profile and take a guess at your ICP and persona. Now, what's really important about this is that the reason that this is the front page to what you do is that a lot of bright minds, and I'm talking about more companies with product market fit, came together to write that content, right? These are not the SDRs and the AEs of the world. These are like your C-suite folks that are working on the messaging and branding and positioning. And, so anything sub $1 billion, usually the mid-market folks have pretty good at least communication of features, benefits, and who we are for, etc. And they talk about case studies too, so there's a lot of rich context. So I'm going to take in all of that rich context into my tool, and I'm going to say, pretend you are the VP of sales of this tool with all of this rich context about who you are, and I want you to then tell me everything about your current customer. I've got a huge understanding of ICP and persona. I may ask questions too in a chat-like interface. What else do you know? And it might even be like, send this to your VP of marketing. What do they know? Give me the context of a customer call, right? What do they know? So taking in more and more context, great. Now I have this really deep understanding of who your customers are. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function call, and I'm going to basically create a bespoke search criteria that fills in those 300 different search criteria. And that is going to be unique to you. It's going to be unique to the company with all the context that I've gleaned. So I can now, in a chat interface, create a search that no other company will experience. Even if your competitors come, because there are so many options here, that is really going to find your best contextual customers. Well, what do we do with it? Well, this is really important. This is the sort of user gems learning here. These things have to have playbooks associated with them. And a perfect example of a playbook is like a competitor rip and replace, right? We've got all this great competitor data. If you want to replace Snowflake or whatever, you can do that, right? But once we tightly define that universe, and the universe can have context around the jobs the company is posting, so you can get a semantic understanding of how they talk about themselves to the market behind closed doors, which is kind of what a job is. So you've got a really tight ICP and persona, and then the tool is going to say, based on this, here is the playbook that you should launch because we have the highest density of problems within that playbook. You tap on the playbook, and what's going to happen next is you're going to get some. Let's like rewind a little bit. Talk about the company match. So you're going to be seeing these companies with the context about why they are fits for you, and you'll be able to chat with this thing and say, "Is this right? Is this right? Is this right?" And constantly iterating. And this is the thing that none of these tools do really well is you need the context of a company front and center. At the individual company level, you kind of need a more granular understanding of that company to be like, not quite right, that's quite right. And as you're doing that, there's two things that are happening. I'm getting more context. I'm getting context on who you are and what questions you ask. This is my moat. Because you're appending more information about your company and what you think, I've got a great moat. That chat actually gives me some interesting insights, the same moat that ChatGPT has. And by surfacing an individual company and making that more prominent, you can really see a company and say, is this a fit? Really hard to do in a line-by-line analysis because all you're seeing about them is headcount or whatever. You're not really understanding the web page. What's the context? So I can bring that context in here and say, you need 5, 10, 15 like good fit companies, bad fit companies to be able to do this really well, especially with large language models. Great. Now, after that's done, you're going to say, based on this most narrowest definition of your ICP, you're going to get some messaging sent back to you. And the key about this messaging is that it is going to force you to have an opinion. And that is something that the large language models will never do. Maybe they can help elicit the opinion, and maybe we can pull in call recordings, etc. But generally, this opinion comes through nuanced conversations with your customers. Jordan, when exactly did you find that you needed a very expensive Sony camera to record YouTube videos? Well, I was actually talking with my friend Paul, and he's a photographer, and it happened during the pandemic when I was blah, blah. So that type of context, you need to be able to dance with the customer to have it. But once the playbook is there, the messaging is relatively simple. And really, the messaging has always been simple. People are overcomplicating it. And that message is like, I did my research on you, Jordan. I have some context on who you are. And the tool will help make that research unique to you. And the most important thing is the Peter Thiel thing, which is what fundamental truth do you believe that other people don't believe? And that is a 1 to 2 sentence thing. And the quality of that insight makes all the difference for the reply rate. Jordan, most people think that to deploy AI in their sales tools, what they need to do is add more complexity so people can play with the bells and whistles, No, remove complexity, but keep all of the complex data structure that exists, but abstract it away. Now, that's just an example of one maybe counterintuitive opinion. So this is what I believe to be the future of these sales tech tools. They're going to be way, way simpler. It's not going to come from any of the incumbents because they're not going to be able to reimagine their products in this way. It's not going to be this fuzzy sense of intent. It is going to be more bespoke fields for now. Eventually, you can get rid of those fields when large language models get good enough. And then an opinion about how you create a search, allowing the person to modify that search naturally and asking questions of the data, which is really hard to do today. The things that you have in your head about which titles you target, which is also helpful for my jobs database, is that you don't really have a great picture of titles. You maybe a 70% accurate picture of titles in your head. And additionally, with that context and being able to dance with the data, you have an understanding of density of those problems in the market. And if you can do that and dance with that market's worth of data and then take it and have structured playbook options where you can inject your unique opinion about why you should exist in a world of deep competitors, and maybe you even challenge the user and go pull their competitors and be like, your competitor say the same thing. It's not actually differentiated. Try again. But I think this is what the next series of sales tools look like. I think probably the person that's closest here is Clay, and they're now working on all the complexity, but I think that this will start to swing in the other direction where the complexity will get abstracted away and the chat tool will be able to chat with the complexity. It will not be able to just go randomly on the internet. I mean, at least not in the next 20 minutes. It won't be able to go randomly on the internet. It has to be able to dance with the complexity. And the better, well-structured the complexity is, because there's all sorts of nuance in the data. We're doing technographics scoring right now. There's 500 additional technographic products that we see in our database every week, right? That sort of changing nature, it has to have a human in the loop for now. All right, well, I hope you found this useful. This was my attempt to articulate where I see these tools going, why they're going this way, where they should be going, and the problem today with intent and the sad sack of filters that exist in most of these sales tools, and what I'm going to do to change it. Always happy to chat. I'm Jordan at blueprintgtm.com. Would love to hear from you. And I'm so grateful that you watched now a 22-minute video about what I think about the future of sales tools. Bye.